Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today is a very important video because we are going to discuss one of the most common comments when it comes to sustainable fashion, which is it is too expensive. But is it really? That's what we're going to talk about today. So I actually think that there are two different aspects to consider. The first one is if it is too expensive in the sense that it is overpriced, so we are spending too much for what we get back. And the second one is it elitist? So is it too expensive to the point that the majority of people cannot afford it? These are very different aspects and they have very different answers. Before starting though, hey, I am Alice and I do videos on sustainable fashion, sustainable living, and basically how we can make more sustainable choices in our life without sacrificing too much or breaking the bank. So if you are interested in that, please consider subscribing to my channel and maybe liking this video if you actually happen to like this video. Starting with the first question, I think that here the problem is that we are so used to the ridiculously low prices of fast fashion that we completely forgot the real cost of things. So of course a t-shirt that costs like 30, 35, sometimes even more euros sounds absolutely overpriced if we think that it's very easy to find a €5 t-shirt that is almost identical on the fast fashion market. The problem is that actually it is a €5 t-shirt that is too cheap, not the other way around. You have to keep in mind that fast fashion manages to keep the prices so low because they're using very cheap material, even cheaper labor, to the point that we can easily talk of modern slavery in a lot of cases because people are overworking, they work ridiculous hours and they are paid almost nothing to the point that they can not sustain themselves, let alone a family. Secondly, you have also to consider that fast fashion is really relying on producing and selling massive quantities, which environmentally is a tragedy, but economically speaking, it actually makes sense. It allows them to reduce the cost of the single items because the cost of machinery, labor, etc., are spread on a huge amount of things. On the other side, if you are a sustainable, truly sustainable brand, then you need to account for several things. First of all, you need to account for fair wages, labor cost, and fairly so because people need to be paid properly for the work they do. And that doesn't go only for garment workers. I think that sometimes when we are talking about fashion, we tend to focus a lot on garment workers, but there are a lot of other people involved in the production chain and they also need to be paid fairly. So, and that goes from the farmer that farms the cotton to the person that delivers the pack into your house. So if you account for all of that, of course, the price rises. Secondly, you need to account for material. As I said before, fast fashion relies on cheap materials, most often than not polyester or other sorts of synthetic materials. And again, environmentally not the best because it's plastic, but economically speaking, it's cheap. On the other side, sustainable brands are using more natural, sustainable materials, so natural fibers like cotton, linen, wool, etc. So of course they cost more. But even when we are comparing natural fibers from sustainable brands to natural fiber from fast fashion, because fast fashion also uses cotton and other natural fibers, still the prices are higher. And that's because sustainable brands normally go for organic crops and organic is more expensive. Let's take the example of cotton, that for what I know it's the most used natural fiber in fashion. Organic cotton does take longer time to grow, and that's because it's grown naturally and it doesn't use fertilizer. Also, you need to farm only a patch of land at a time to let the soil rest and avoid depleting the soil, which is extremely important from an environmental point of view, but again, economically speaking, it means that you can produce less. And finally, of course, there are the people side involved. People needs to be paid. So of course it does cost more than conventional cotton. Another criticism that I hear a lot often is that if sustainable brands are using recycled materials, then it should be cheaper, while most of the times it's actually higher. And that's because recycled materials not always are cheaper than the virgin material. So for example, let's take the example of polyester, which, as I said before, is one of the most used fabric, and it's also one of the most recycled as far as I know, which environmentally, again, very, very important, because we have a huge plastic pollution at the moment, so we need to do something with our plastic, and recycling it into different clothes is a very good idea. The problem is that plastic cannot be recycled straight away. You need to shred it, bleach it, recombine it, and then you can start thinking rebuilding something else. So you need to pay for all these in-between steps. You need to account for certification. Certification is not a perfect system, but they are still very important for the consumer, because it is a good way to understand if the brands we are buying from is really sustainable or if it is only greenwashing. The problem is that certification also costs money, because there is also time and labor involved. And finally, these are normally small companies, which again environmentally makes sense, because it means that you are avoiding overproduction and you are keeping your waste in check. The problem is that in this way you're really not able to spread out the cost all that much, which means that the single items will cost more. So to conclude, the answer to our question is yes, these items are expensive, but no, they are not overpriced. The price a lot of time is actually very reasonable. The answer to this question is they are definitely elitist, and that's because even if the price is reasonable and justified, these are still too expensive for the majority of people to afford, and this makes them elitist by definition. And indeed, sustainable life in general is a privilege, because it means that you have enough money to be able to decide what to do with that money, which is great, but unfortunately is not the reality for a lot of people, and that's deeply unfair, because a sustainable lifestyle should be available to everyone, and indeed it should actually be the norm, and this is not the case. That's why we do need a systemic change. What we can do as individual is important, but it's not enough. We need a much bigger change. But this is the topic for a whole different video. It's a little bit too big for now. But let's be honest, it's also true that at least in our Western world, we tend to buy a lot more than necessary. So, and that's again, I think that it's because fast fashion completely detached us to the reality, in the sense that the cost of the single items is so low that we are led to buy way more than we need, still thinking that we are spending very little. But in practice, we are not, because if you account for the cost of all these small items all together, then the cost goes a lot up. So try to assess your spending and see if maybe you can buy less and invest more in better quality item. And yes, I know that that is not feasible for everyone, and if you already are buying the minimum indispensable and you still cannot afford sustainable items, that's perfectly okay. I would say maybe try to see if you can go on the second-hand route, because shopping second-hand is the best way to go, at least sustainability-wise. It's still better than sustainable items if they are new. But I also know that buying second-hand is easier said than done. For a lot of people, this is not feasible for many reasons. So if that's your case, then by all means continue buying fast fashion free of guilt. If there's nothing else you can do, there's nothing else you can do. I'm sure that you are already doing a lot of things to reduce your impact. So I would say try to focus more on what you can and what you are already doing, rather than obsessing over something that you can't do. And that was it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video interesting, and see you next time. Bye!